Americans are taught a cartoonish version of World War I and World War II. We are told there was no conflict. Germans were inherently evil people who must be destroyed, so Americans fought to save the world. The word Nazi remains common in our language as an evil person. In reality, both wars were caused by bankers and industrial tycoons who reaped great profits.
The symbols and the leaders change, but Germany's maniacal urge to impose its will on others continues from generation to generation.
Germany was never invaded in World War I. The German army drove to the outskirts of Paris before American troops arrived to counterattack and push them back while suffering heavy casualties. As this map shows, Allied forces had gained only a few tiny footholds of German territory when the fighting ended in 1918. World leaders had agreed the war was a horrible mistake from bad assumptions made by all sides, and it should end. World War I was very unpopular in the United States, and over 90% of those who served in the U.S. Army were conscripted. As a result, American President Woodrow Wilson ended the fighting with a fair 14 points peace proposal that resulted in an armistice, a ceasefire, to allow time to formally end the war with a peace treaty. German troops quickly withdrew from France. The Germans considered Wilson's 14 proposals reasonable and agreed to an armistice on November 11, 1918. A peace conference was held at Versailles just outside Paris, shown in this video. Wilson's 14th proposal stated, quote, "A general association of nations must be formed under specific covenants for the purpose of affording mutual guarantees of political independence and territorial integrity to great and small states alike. We have no jealousy of German greatness, and there is nothing in this program that impairs it. We grudge her no achievement or distinction of learning of her Pacific enterprise, such as have to make her record very bright and very enviable. We do not wish to injure her or to block in any way her legitimate influence of power. We do not wish to fight her either with arms or with hostile arrangements of trade, if she is willing to associate herself with us and the other peace-loving nations of the world in the covenants of justice and law and fair dealing. We wish her only to accept a place of equality among the peoples of the world." End quote. The peace conference quickly became a joke since the Germans were not invited, and most of Wilson's 14 points were scuttled by the leaders of England and France. To his dismay, President Wilson discovered that England, France, and Italy were mostly interested in gaining more land and weakening Germany. The Allies demanded that Germany cede large regions.
When the Big Three had finished their discussions, they went into this room, which is the Hall of Mirrors, in the iconic Palace of Versailles, just outside Paris. Here, the German delegation were forced to sign the treaty on the 28th of June, 1919, exactly 5 years to the day after the assassination of Franz Ferdinand. The treaty only dealt with Germany, it didn't deal with Austria-Hungary or anybody else. This map shows the land issues and how it was carved up, and I want to take you through each of these in turn. focusing on who they went to and what impact they had on Germany. If we start on the Western Front, or the western end of Germany, the first thing I want to focus on is Alsace-Lorraine down here in yellow. As that had gone back and forward between France and Germany over the years, France obviously was restored this in the treaty. The tiny two provinces of Eupen and Malmedy were given to Belgium after a plebiscite, which means a vote. They were transferred away from Germany and added on to the end of Belgium. North Schleswig again had a plebiscite vote, and they decided they would rather go and be part of Denmark. So in the very north, that lost from Germany. And this greyed-in area here, the Saar coalfields, was very important. It was Germany's industrial heartland. France knew it wasn't going to get a lot of the money back that it had forced to use during the war from Germany. So instead, it wanted to take away its coalfields for 15 years so it could dig the coal out of the ground and sell it and make some money. 15 years later, there was to be another plebiscite, a vote, to see where the people of the Saar wanted to be. But at the time of the treaty, France was given this area for 15 years. On the other side, on the Eastern Front, similar things. Firstly, Poland, that had existed before it was destroyed, was now remade as an independent state. Danzig, which was a port on the north coast of Germany, was classed as a free city under the control of the League of Nations. One of the reasons was Poland needed access to the sea, so the UN needed to control that port for their benefit. Upper Silesia, which was here, was given some to Germany and some to Poland. Memel, up in the top here, was another seaport. That was ruled by the League and eventually taken over by Lithuania. All the gains that Russia had given to Germany when they pulled out of the war in 1918 were returned. Austria and Germany were now forbidden in the future to join together. And all of their overseas colonies round the world were forfeit. They had to be given to the League of Nations to control.
In much of this territory, most residents were ethnic Germans who wanted to remain part of Germany. The British and French insisted on ceding land because they wanted to weaken Germany by making it smaller. Austria-Hungary was dismantled, and demands by ethnic Germans in regions adjacent to join Germany were rejected. The German Sudetenland was awarded to British-created Czechoslovakia. Protests by these Germans and other ethnic groups ruled by a Czech minority eventually led to the collapse of that artificial nation. The Allies also demanded that Germany accept blame for the war and pay massive reparations, mostly because the bankrupt French and British couldn't afford to repay their massive loans to New York banks. The demands were so outrageous that many Germans wanted to resume fighting. But after the Armistice, the Allies had kept their wartime sea blockade of German ports. This had caused food problems in Germany by 1917 and was a main factor in agreeing to the Armistice, but it remained in place to pressure Germany. In December 1918, the German Board of Public Health reported that 763,000 German civilians had died from starvation and disease caused by the blockade. Dr. Max Rubner, in an April 1919 article, stated that 100,000 more German civilians had died from the continuation of the blockade of Germany after the Armistice until the Germans signed the peace agreement under duress. Germany agreed to sign the Paris Peace Agreement to end the famine, but there was no way Germany could pay massive reparations and quickly fell behind payment schedules. This surprised no one, but the French were angry because the war was fought in France and much remained devastated. In January 1923, France and Belgium sent troops into the nearby German Ruhr region that included most of Germany's industry and coal mines. German troops had pulled back from the Ruhr as part of the peace agreement to create a demilitarized buffer zone. The invasion was to ensure that all German coal and industrial products were shipped to France. This was considered provocative and denounced by the United States, Britain, and most other European nations. The Germans were furious as French occupation troops were abusive, and German workers began factory strikes as right-wing political parties in Germany attracted millions of new members. 127 German civilians were killed by French troops and 600 wounded, as over 100,000 Germans were imprisoned.
Es war also viel Schikane. Es kam allgemein Hunger, Not, Elend und, was uns sehr betroffen hat, auch eine Demütigung hinzu. Und da haben wir dann doch erlebt, dass die Franzosen mit ziemlich harter Hand regiert haben. Wenn es ihnen nicht passte, man ging auf den Bürgersteig, kamen sie mit der Reitpeitsche und man musste auf den Fahrdamm hinuntergehen. Und wollten vielleicht überhaupt Rache nehmen.
Reparation payments actually fell, so American bankers offered to help. This resulted in the Dawes Plan of 1925. German reparation payments were slashed to a reasonable level, French troops withdrew, and Germans returned to work. American banks loaned Germany a huge sum to help with reconstruction and reparations. Since the Germans could not make full payments each month, American bankers would help by accepting stock shares of German industry. This became very profitable for American bankers, who eventually owned large shares of major German corporations and opened offices in Germany. Union Banking Corporation of New York played a key role. One of its directors was Prescott Bush, pictured here, whose son and grandson would go on to become President of the United States. Another director was Averell Harriman, a partner in the firm Brown Brothers Harriman, the oldest and one of the largest private investment banks in the United States. New York banks and investors helped rebuild and rearm Germany even after Adolf Hitler became chancellor. They saw the Bolsheviks in Russia as a great threat to the West and a strong Germany as a protector. Lots of books were written about this topic. See them linked in the description. Here's a quick overview by famous American lawyer Daniel Sheehan.
That in 1918, at the end of World War I, right, the Versailles Treaty is set up, and it turns out that the two grandchildren of John W. Foster, John Foster Dulles and Allen Dulles, both young lawyers at Sullivan and Cromwell, are brought with their uncle, Robert Lansing, Secretary of State, brings them to the Versailles Treaty agreements in Paris. They draft into the Versailles Treaty the reparations requirements, imposing upon Germany a burden to repay the corporations for the damage they'd inflicted on any of their corporate properties during the war, right? And since they didn't have the funds to actually pay those reparations, what they did is Brown Brothers Harriman, the legal counsel for whom was Allen Dulles, they agreed to give loans to the German government to be able to pay the reparations, in exchange for which they took stock in their major war industries. The Krupp ball bearing factory, the IG Farben pharmaceutical and explosives companies, all those major industries. And then the investors in Brown Brothers Harriman actually invested money in their war industry. Okay, to rebuild their war machine at the end of World War I. They're the ones that rebuilt the entire German juggernaut under Hitler. And the CEO of Brown Brothers Harriman, who had forwarded all these loans, the CEO of Brown Brothers Harriman is George Herbert Walker.
Oh, my God.
You don't have to call him that, but it was close. But George Herbert Walker is the CEO of Brown Brothers Harriman. His son-in-law is Prescott Bush.
Who becomes Hitler's financier.
And what happens is George Herbert Walker steps out in 1924 from the CEO position at Brown Brothers Harriman, creates the Union Bank of New York. And it's all capitalized by investors from Brown Brothers Harriman, who are all the major robber barons. You know, all those guys that owned, the Carnegie and Rockefeller and Harriman, the rail lines, they owned the agricultural lines, they owned the steel mills, they owned they had monopolized basically the top 15, 20 areas of the American economy. And they had all the funds, and what they did is they capitalized the Union Bank of New York. The Union Bank of New York sets up a subsidiary up in the Netherlands called the Bank of Shipping and Commerce. This guy, Fritz Thyssen, runs the bank for them, and they finance the construction of the international headquarters of the Third Reich. Okay? And they set up the entire Third Reich to become the bulwark against Bolshevism in Europe. That's their whole job.
Yes.
And that they financed the whole rise of Hitler. In fact, in the meeting on January 3rd, 1933, when Adolf Hitler is made the Chancellor of Germany,
right,
sitting in the meeting is Allen Dulles,
yep,
legal counsel for Brown Brothers Harriman, and insisting that he sign an agreement, being willing to accept the burden of paying the reparations agreement if he's going to be made the Chancellor, to protect those loans that they have given to them. And
this became an issue during World War II as investigation into Nazi collaboration caused embarrassments and the Union Bank was shut down. However, lawyer Allen Dulles from Brown Brothers Harriman joined the American OSS intelligence agency since he had many contacts in Germany. He was assigned to Switzerland during the war, where he maintained contacts with high-level Germans to protect American investments.
Dulles, from his perch in Switzerland during the war, continued to represent Nazi interests. He was trying to cut deals, side deals, in defiance of Roosevelt's policy of unconditional surrender with Nazi emissaries, separate peace deals. After the war, he helps establish the so-called rat lines that were escape routes for Nazi war criminals that were set up so they could flee from Germany over the Alps down through Italy and overseas to safety. He even helped rehabilitate some of the more notorious Nazi war criminals, allowing them to go back into daily life, even official life in West Germany, post-war Germany. The top spy master in West Germany, I tell this story, is Reinhard Gehlen, who was Hitler's top spy master on the bloody Eastern Front. And Allen Dulles helped install him as the top intelligence official in West German government. He played a very important role in the Cold War for many years. So that's number one, the collaboration with the Nazis. I argue in some ways that we didn't crush the Third Reich so much as repurpose it for the Cold War.
There is evidence that Dulles helped the Germans ship their wealth outside Germany during the war to repay American investors who helped them hide gold stocks. See the link to Mark Felton's recent report in the description. After the war, Dulles helped hundreds of high-level German officials to move to work in the United States or secure high-level positions in West Germany. Allen Dulles then became director of the CIA, where he continued his work for American bankers.